Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today, continuing on with the International Booker Prize longlist for 2025, I am reading There's a Monster Behind the Door by Gaëlle, Bélem, and translated from the original French by Karen Fleetwood and Laëtitia Saint-Loubert. And this book is, I think, a really interesting one in several different ways. And I'll get talking about it. It should be a relatively spoiler-free one, I think. So I will likely not necessarily need to go into that, but I will flag that if it is something that needs to be done. But I'm intrigued by this book for several reasons. And I think when you think of the International Booker Prize, what's often quite interesting about what they're able to do in terms of giving additional platforms to some authors and to some books is that sometimes these are books that would otherwise not necessarily have been caught by the same reading public for various reasons. And in this case, we have a book from a woman from La Réunion, which is an overseas French territory, but there is an odd relationship there because of how it became to be a territory and colonialism and various other things within that. This is also from an independent press, and I think, and this was also shortlisted, I believe, or longlisted at least, for the Republic of Consciousness Prize, which is a small prizes list. And what I think comes up so interestingly in this is the various ways that stories like this don't normally get told. And there's something that goes on, I think, within the translation that is also quite interesting for this, because there's an author's note or translator's note at the beginning that talks about how Réunion French is often not understood or not seen in as many places. I mean, firstly, literature from Réunion is much less seen. It's a smaller place, but also the publishing industry is significantly smaller. Fewer resources are generally put towards books from that area being translated. So you've got a type of French already that is being translated into English, but to capture a specific nuance, because some of these phrases are maybe just about intelligible to a French person, but clearly mark this person or this writer out as being different, as not mainland European French. And so this book immediately is already engaging with a few of those things. And part of the translation decision making within this book has also been to use phrases in Réunion French alongside English. And so we get it's not necessarily transcribed as here is a different type of English we're using. We're keeping the Réunion French and the phrases from it to talk about this book. And so as a result, something quite interesting happens where the text is also playing a lot with language, because it has to, because naturally that is a part of the story. But anyway, speaking of that, let's get to the actual story itself. I've spoken for a while here just about Réunion French, so let's go on to the next part. So the story itself is centered around a young girl who is part of a very well-known family in La Réunion. And the surname Saint, I think I'm probably mispronouncing that, is a very well-known one. They are a violent family. They are known locally as being someone you don't want to get on the wrong side of. And so this little girl is brought into this life, and slowly as she grows up comes to realize that this is not where she wants to be for a variety of reasons, but she recognizes that her future will probably not be in this family if she can help it. She doesn't think she'll be particularly safe, but also it doesn't feel like something that feels right to her. And so what we see is basically her upbringing, where we watch for a lot of the book as she grows older, as she comes to make some of her own decisions. And I will say, for me, the middle part of this book, I was trying to understand where we were going with this, because it felt at one point like a very standard growing up story. And I was wondering what machinations are maybe going on in the background for this book to take it to where it wants to go. What's the point of view of this book? Where is it aiming to go? And actually, I think it starts to really achieve that towards the end. And I realized that the book is slowly pulling the strings to get you there. So we are watching as she slowly gains freedom throughout her life. She makes more and more decisions that are hers, but she's haunted by this family name. Anywhere she goes, there is a sense that this family name will precede her. So she tries to either minimize it or to try and almost go by other names and see if she can find a way to not be herself or to not inherit the legacy of her family. And what we then get is that it sort of points out the idea that maybe this is never possible. Can you ever really escape what this looks like? And without spoiling anything towards the end, I think the writing towards the end of this book is suddenly on fire with talking about this very core idea of the book, this discussion at the center of this book about freedom, because the book starts to really engage, I think, with a more philosophical conversation about freedom. What is freedom? What does it look like if you are not only an inheritor of a legacy of a family, but you are also an inheritor of post-colonialism, or of colonialism rather? What does it look like if you are inheriting various things around you? Are you really free if you grow up in a small island nation that has been colonized and is still somewhat beholden to someone else? And in this way, the girl herself, the central character, is almost a metaphor for kind of colonialism. The violence of France and of colonialism haunts La Réunion, but potentially the same way that it haunts this young girl being part of a family. No matter what people think about it, you are always attached in some ways to something. Every part of you is linked to this. So, you know, the way you speak, maybe because you grew up in a French overseas region or because of the family you grew up in, is influenced by the people around you. And slowly, can you ever really escape these things? And I think the book, again, towards the end, really thoroughly engages with this core idea and starts to really thoroughly argue what freedom might be for this character. And we start to see that there's maybe a sort of a feature of this that is linked to the author herself. We see towards the end of the book that there is more of a push for this person to become a writer, and that this is something that they want to do. They want to write their story. Is that something that you can do when your story has been somewhat told for you because of who you are? The story has announced itself before you've turned up because of your surname. But also, is there still a chance to redeem that, to write a different story? Is there a chance that you might fall down the same paths as everyone else? And I think that's what's quite fun and interesting about this book. I think overall, I got lost a little bit in the middle of the book, but I think to some degree it needed to be the slow, descriptive part to bring you towards the end part of the book and its thesis. But for me, I still thought this was really really beautiful at times in the way that it captured these little moments of what it means to be young and to be beholden to a family. And I think it's a really fascinating book overall. So I see why this was long listed. That's me talking about this book. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I shall speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.